If your life has quietly fallen apart over the past few months, with no one noticing, and yet you still wake up every day performing a functional version of yourself, listen to this calmly. This is not failure. It's the first time in many years that you're actually seeing the truth. And the person who understood this phenomenon better than anyone was the British philosopher Alan Watts, who spent decades investigating the blind spots of Western existence, bringing the West closer to the contemplative traditions of Zen and Taoism. His work dismantles the illusions we've inherited from tradition, from work, and from the constant inconsistency between who we say we are and how we actually exist. And what if what you're feeling is a collapse is actually an opening? What changes in your life starting today? Take a deep breath and stick with me until the end, because we're going to descend together to the root of this discomfort. There's a scene that repeats itself in the life of the modern man, and almost no one notices it. It's the scene of the bathroom mirror at night. You look at your own face after another full day of tasks, meetings, replied messages, and professional smiles, and for a second you don't recognize the person standing there. It's not a physical strangeness. It's a deeper kind of strangeness. The feeling of being inside a life that looks like yours on paper, but not in your chest. You did everything they told you to do. You studied, you worked, you built, you maintained. And even so, when the bedroom light goes out, something inside you stays awake, quietly asking whether this is really how it was supposed to be. Alan Watts wrote about this back in 1951, in a small, dense, and uncomfortable book called The Wisdom of Insecurity. He was observing 20th century man, and he saw something few people saw. Anguish, he said, was not a defect of the individual. It was a symptom of the system, a natural reaction of a human mind exposed for too long to the artificial. The more society promised security, the more insecure we became. The more life filled up with objects, the emptier it seemed. The more options we were given, the more paralyzed we became in the face of any real choice. Look at everyday life, and the thesis stands on its own. The cold light of the phone hits your face before you've even had coffee. Notifications arrive before thoughts. Work emails come in before mid-morning. The perfect photos other people post arrive before you've even had time to ask yourself how you're doing. And then the day starts, already disoriented, already comparing, already reacting, already chasing something you never actually chose to chase. When the exhaustion shows up at night, it isn't just from the body. It's the exhaustion of having spent another day playing a role that doesn't match your soul. I know it's hard to hear this, because admitting this kind of discomfort can feel like ingratitude. It can feel like a luxury, like the arrogance of someone who has enough, like disrespect toward people who have far less. But the truth is that having enough isn't the same thing as being whole. And that difference is exactly the point where this line of thinking starts to open a door inside you. There's a phrase he used a lot: social conditioning. He said we're trained from an early age to function inside a structure. We learn to smile at the right times, to keep quiet at the right times, to want what they tell us to want, and to forget what we silently knew before we became adults. There's no villain in this story, no shadowy plan. There's only a machine that has been feeding itself for generations, a structural logic that teaches every child to become a functional adult, and every adult to become an efficient piece of a machine that no one fully assembled, but that everyone keeps turning. And then, somewhere around 30, around 40, sometimes much earlier, that piece starts to crack, not because it's weak, but because it's alive, and what's alive was never made to fit forever inside a mold. That's where what many people call an existential crisis begins. And that's where the first big mistake lies. Because the word crisis carries the idea of a problem, of something wrong, of a defect to be corrected as quickly as possible. The philosopher looked at the same phenomenon and saw something else. He saw a manufactured identity beginning to crumble. And to crumble, in this case, doesn't mean to end. It means to stop pretending. Picture a 40-year-old man sitting in his car in the company parking lot, before going up for another meeting. The engine is already off. His hands are still firm on the steering wheel, his eyes locked on some random point on the windshield. From the outside, he's just delaying going in. Inside, a small silent earthquake is happening. He can't explain it, but something in him refuses to keep pretending that any of this matters. It's not deep burnout. It's not laziness. It's not a lack of gratitude. It's not a one-off bout of stress. It's the soul refusing to keep paying the price of a life it didn't fully choose. That moment for him isn't the end. It's a beginning. It's the cracked sound of a mask that served him for a long time and no longer fits his face. And here's the uncomfortable part. Most people, when they feel that crack, rush to cover it up. They buy more. They work more. They drink more. They distract themselves more. They dive into anything that makes the silence go away. Because silence, when it shows up, brings questions no one taught us how to answer. Who are you when no one is looking? What's left of you when they take away the title, the salary, the last name, and the social role? When the role of provider, of model son, of successful man, of the guy who handles everything, all fall away. What remains when all the labels come off? Watts used to say, in that almost playful way of his, that modern man has become an expert at running away from himself, and that this flight, repeated over the years, is what produces the feeling of being lost. You're not lost because you have no path. You're lost because you spent years following a path that wasn't yours. And at some point, the body, the soul, time, something inside you simply refuses to keep going. I'm not saying this to make you anxious. I'm saying it to wake you up. Because if it's true that this feeling of collapse is the falling apart of a manufactured identity, then what looks like ruin may actually be foundation. What looks like a breakdown may be a clearing. What looks like the worst moment of your life may be the exact instant in which something more real is trying to be born. His thinking went even deeper. He said we live inside a kind of collective performance. Not because people are dishonest, but because they were taught to perform. We repeat phrases we don't think about. We hold up smiles we don't feel. And we defend dreams we never stopped to check whether they were actually ours. And in this game, we lose touch with the simplest thing there is, which is the direct taste of life in the moment it's happening. We trade the raw experience for the menu. And then we spend decades devouring descriptions, comparisons, projections, and simulations, without ever really sitting down at the table. When this machinery starts to fail inside you, it feels like illness. But it's the opposite. It's health coming back. It's the whole organism letting you know it can no longer stand the gap between who you are and who you've been pretending to be. That signal usually comes in the form of a strange tiredness, insomnia for no clear reason, irritability out of nowhere, a loss of interest in things that used to work. You think something has gone wrong. He would look at it and calmly say that something, finally, is going right. Here lies the heart of the wisdom of insecurity. Watts dedicates pages to a simple and devastating idea. The human obsession with security is, itself, the source of suffering. Trying to pin life down, he said, is like trying to hold water in a closed fist. The harder you squeeze, the less is left. Life, by nature, slips through. And it doesn't slip through because it's cruel. It slips through because it's alive. Everything that's alive is in motion, and any attempt to freeze existence into a fixed shape is a losing battle against the very nature of what's real. Modern man wasn't raised to understand this. He was raised to build walls, buy insurance, stockpile reserves, secure retirement plans, and plan 10 years ahead. None of that, in itself, is the problem. The problem is the silent expectation underneath it all. The expectation that, at some point, life will stop hurting. That at some point, you'll reach a stable plateau where nothing threatens you anymore and nothing inside you gets shaken. And since this plateau doesn't exist, the frustration never ends. You spend your life chasing a feeling that life, by definition, has never delivered to anyone. The philosopher suggested a counterintuitive move. Instead of running from insecurity, lying down in it. Instead of treating it as an enemy, recognizing it as a condition. Insecurity is not a flaw in the human design. It's the texture of existence. And accepting that, instead of paralyzing you, sets you free. Because the moment you stop demanding from the world a guarantee it has never offered, you start for the first time to live without that secret pressure in your chest. Think of someone learning how to swim. As long as the person keeps trying to hold themselves up at the surface, all tense, full of fear, the water feels like an opponent. The instant they relax, that same water holds the body up. The water didn't change. The relationship to it did. Life works the same way. It only suffocates the people who try to dominate it. It carries the people who learn to trust it. And here you might be thinking, but how do you trust a world this big? With so much chaos, with so much unpredictability? Watts's answer would be simple and almost disarming. You don't trust the world out there. You trust the fact that even in the chaos, something in you keeps breathing, keeps seeing, keeps feeling, keeps awake beneath the noise. That silent ground that has never abandoned you, not even on the worst days, is what he would call your true ground. It isn't your job. It isn't your relationship. It isn't your bank account. It's the living presence that's here right now reading these words, and that has been present at every important scene in your life without needing an audience. Now look at the practical side. Look at work. There's a silent statistic that nobody puts on a resume. The number of men who spend 8 to 10 hours a day carrying out tasks that mean almost nothing to them. I'm not talking about manual labor or low-paid jobs. I'm talking about good positions, decent salaries, air-conditioned offices. Even there, the soul does its math differently. It doesn't calculate in currency. It calculates in meaning. And when meaning is missing, no salary is enough to fill the hole. Watts was harsh with Western culture on this point. He said we were taught to live for a future that never arrives. You work the whole week waiting for the weekend. You wait for the end of the month for your paycheck. You wait the whole year for vacation. You wait 10 years for the promotion. You wait 30 for retirement. And when retirement finally comes, you realize you waited so much that you forgot to live along the way. Life turned into a waiting room. And the worst part is that nobody tells you the waiting room was your whole life. In one of his best-known talks, Life and Music, Watts compared existence to a piece of music. Nobody listens to a symphony just to get to the final chord. Nobody dances to finish the dance. You listen, you dance, you give yourself over to the moment the music is playing. But modern man learned to listen to life as if it were a race to the finish, as if arriving were more important than the journey. And so we spend decades in a hurry, never noticing that the rush itself was what was stealing the flavor of the experience. Maybe you recognize yourself right now. Maybe you remember some Sunday night with that tightness in your chest before Monday. Maybe you remember entire Januaries staring at the year's calendar, wishing December would just hurry up and arrive. That tightness, that rush, that feeling that everything is just the waiting room for something else. That exhaustion of always going and never arriving. That's what the philosopher pointed to as the great mistake of the modern mind. And the mistake is not yours. It's inherited. You grew up inside it, but noticing it is the first step towards stepping out of it. Now look at your phone, at your contact list. How many of those people, if they vanished tomorrow, would leave a real hole in your life? I'm not talking about polite affection. I'm talking about presence that carries weight. Most of the relationships we maintain today fit into a strange space, somewhere between known and unknown. We know the name, we know the job title, we know where the person spent their last vacation thanks to the photos, but we know almost nothing about what actually hurts inside them. And they know almost nothing about what hurts inside you. Watts saw, with clarity, the fragmentation of the modern individual. The man split into pieces, professional, social, family, digital, without any of those pieces knowing the others. You have one version of yourself for work, another for your parents, another for the messaging app, another for the messaging app, another for social media. And at some point it becomes hard to remember which one is the real one. That mismatch with yourself reflects directly in the quality of your relationships. You can't offer someone else a depth you've already lost in yourself. And it's not about cutting people off. It's not about isolating yourself. It's about noticing the difference between a full schedule and a soul that has company. You can have hundreds of contacts and still be alone in a way that's frightening. You can have 0 contacts and be accompanied by a solid inner presence. The quality of human connection isn't in the volume. It's in the truth that flows between two people. And modern man, trained to perform, has forgotten how to simply be with someone without having to prove anything. There's a common scene that illustrates this. Two friends at a bar, after months without seeing each other. Within 15 minutes, the conversation has already moved to the news, sports, traffic, and work. The conversation flows, but only on the surface. Each one talks about what they're doing. Nobody asks how the other one is being. And the two of them leave with a faint sense that it was good, but not quite enough. That not quite enough is the symptom. It's the soul complaining that it needs more depth, and that the current rhythm of human connection no longer has room for it. He would call this alienation, not in the classic Marxist sense, but in the literal sense, to become a stranger. A stranger to your own chest, a stranger to the chest of the other person, a stranger to the moment in which you are alive, a stranger to the body breathing right now. When that alienation piles up over years, it produces a very specific kind of loneliness. The loneliness that shows up while your phone is full. The loneliness of being surrounded and still having no one really reach you. Now comes another deep cut. Achievements. The things you were trained to call success. The car, the title, the property, the recognition, the number in your account. You crossed them off the list, and even crossed off. Something didn't quite close. There was supposed to be a big, definitive feeling, and what came was a lukewarm, brief, almost disappointing one. On the inside, you wonder if you're being ungrateful. On the outside, you smile in the photos. And the silence between the two is exactly where the problem lives. Watts had a delightful metaphor for this. He used to say that modern man spends his life eating the menu and thinking it's the food. He confuses the symbol with the substance, money with wealth, the title with competence, the like with affection, the ceremony with the lived experience. And then, when he finally reaches the top of the pile of menus, he realizes he's still hungry. Because a menu doesn't feed you. A menu describes. And you've spent decades describing a life you forgot to actually live. This image appears in the book, On the Taboo Against Knowing Who You Are, from 1966, and in several of his lectures. And it hits hard because it reveals something almost everyone feels, but few people can put into words. The paradox of empty success. You hit the goal delivers less than it promised. You assume the problem was the goal. You set a bigger goal. You hit it. It delivers even less. And so life passes by, in pursuit of a feeling those symbols were never capable of producing. It's not that achieving things is wrong. It's not that earning money is wrong. The mistake is outsourcing your worth to the result. You start to exist as a function of the next objective. And when the objective arrives, it doesn't hand you peace. Because peace was never on the outside. Peace lives in a place no achievement can reach. It lives in your direct relationship with presence. And that relationship, ironically, is free. It's available right now, exactly where you are, even with all your bills unpaid, and all your goals still pending. Let's pause here for a moment. Because all of this might sound abstract, and the truth is that it touches something very concrete. It touches the guy who's right now, in this very moment, sitting on the couch after another long day, phone in hand, silently asking himself if this is really all there is. I understand completely when you catch yourself in that thought. It's not weakness, it's not emotional fragility, it's not a lack of strength, it's the first real honesty in a long time. It's the soul refusing to keep swallowing the smaller version of you they sold you. And that's exactly where the most difficult concept of Watts's philosophy comes into play. The ego as a character. He said, in his 1966 book, that what we call the self is for the most part a construction. A character learned so early and rehearsed for so many years that we forget we're acting. You learn to be a son in a specific way. You learn to be a man in a specific way. You learn to be a professional, a good friend, a good partner, an acceptable person. And those layers piled up until the line between who you are and who you play on stage became blurred. The ego, he said, is not the enemy. It's useful. It organizes practical life, pays the bills, remembers clients' names, meets deadlines. The problem starts when it's taken too seriously. When you start to believe it's all you are. When you mistake the mask for the face. Then your whole life becomes a defense of the character. Every criticism becomes an existential threat. And every mistake becomes a failure of your entire soul. And modern suffering, in his view, is largely this idolatry of the character. Imagine an actor who walks into the theater every day, puts on the costume of his role, memorizes the lines, performs the scene, and at some point forgets to take off the costume. He keeps wearing it after the show. He sleeps in it, wakes up in it, has breakfast in it, walks out into the street without even noticing. After years, the costume has become his skin. And taking it off hurts, but the pain of taking it off is not the pain of an ending. It's the pain of returning. It's the real skin reappearing after being covered for a long time. Watts wasn't asking you to drop everything, become a monk, leave your family and disappear into the Himalayas. He was asking for something more subtle and more profound. He was asking you to recognize the performance, to see the character with affection, not with anger, to understand that it served an important function, but that it isn't your foundation. Your foundation is what was there before the character. And it's still there, patient, waiting to be remembered. If you're enjoying this content, check the first comment for our exclusive ebook, Alchemy and Archetypes. When that recognition begins, something curious happens. The mind starts to feel exhausted, because keeping a character running all the time consumes a huge amount of energy. It's like holding a muscle clenched for decades. You got so used to the contraction that you forgot what it felt like to be relaxed. When the relaxation starts to show up, sometimes it comes disguised as exhaustion. You think you're burned out. He would say you're, finally, letting go. The modern obsession with control, productivity, hurry, and performance isn't culture. It's a symptom. It's the desperate attempt of a mind that was never trained to trust the flow of life. And when that mind spends decades in command, never resting, it starts to break down, not because it's defective, because of overuse. Western man, he said, runs without ever arriving. He's always heading toward the next step, always anticipating the next problem, always solving a future that doesn't yet exist, always postponing the present. And the present, the only real place where life actually happens, becomes a blurry backdrop to the rush. Think about a credit card statement showing up in your email. You open the notification, your stomach tightens, your mind is already calculating, already planning, already anticipating, already bracing for the worst. Before you've even decided how to react, your body has already reacted. Cortisol shot up, breathing got shallow, shoulders rose, jaw locked. Repeat that 1,000 times a day, with 1,000 different notifications, and you'll have a nervous system that has learned to live in permanent emergency mode. The fatigue isn't an exaggeration, it's mathematical consequence. He wouldn't use the word burnout, but the phenomenon he was describing is the same. The modern mind is exhausted because it has been put to do the work of the spirit. It has been forced to calculate what can only be felt. It has been forced to control what can only be trusted, to predict what is, by nature, unpredictable, and to hold all of that up alone for years on end. And at some point, it breaks, not because it's weak, but because it was assigned an impossible job. If you, right now, are feeling that kind of exhaustion, I understand completely, and it's completely valid to feel that way. It isn't being soft, it isn't whining. It's the honest report of a life asking for a deep adjustment. The adjustment, according to him, isn't to do more, it's to do less of what's unnecessary. It isn't to run faster, it's to stop chasing things that were never yours. It also isn't to solve, but to recognize. And it isn't to win, but to come back home to yourself. And then comes the most delicate topic, maybe the hardest one of all, the emptiness. That feeling that shows up when the noise stops. When you turn off the notifications, close the tabs, silence the phone, get out of traffic, and stay quiet. Most people, the moment they touch that silence, pull back. They turn the TV back on, pick the phone back up, start scrolling again, get distracted again, because silence throws open questions no one wants to face. Who are you without the noise? What's left of you when no one is calling for you? Watts, deeply influenced by Zen and Taoism, taught that emptiness is not absence. It's space. It's the place where something real can finally appear. Think of a room cluttered with furniture. There's no space for anything new. To let in light, you have to empty it out. To let in air, you have to open up. Inner emptiness works the same way. It's frightening at first, because you're used to the mental clutter. But when you have the courage to sit in it, you realize it's fertile. There, in the middle of what looks like nothing, a clearer, cleaner, more authentic perception begins to grow, more aligned with what was always there, waiting to be heard. Sitting in the emptiness isn't religious meditation. It isn't becoming a mystic. It's simply stopping for a few minutes with no distractions at all and bearing the raw presence of existence. At first, it hurts. The mind starts inventing tasks, starts remembering unanswered messages, starts creating fake emergencies, starts whispering that something important is waiting outside. That's the symptom of how long you've been running from yourself. But if you stay, the inner storm starts to settle. And, deep down, a calm appears that doesn't depend on any circumstance at all. Watts said, in his 1957 book, The Way of Zen, that this calm isn't built. It's discovered. It was already there, beneath the noise, waiting for the silence to reveal it. And when it shows itself for the first time, it usually brings tears, not tears of sadness. Tears of reunion. It's as if a part of you that had been locked away for years was finally remembered. And you realize, with something between relief and shame, that you spent your whole life looking outside for what was always inside. In silence, waiting. Connected to all of this is time. And here Watts is surgical. He said that psychological time is one of the greatest sources of human suffering. The future, in the strict sense, doesn't exist. It's projection. The past also doesn't exist. It's reconstructed memory. The only moment that actually exists is now. And even so, the modern mind spends most of the day in every other tense, except this one. You're in the shower remembering yesterday's meeting. You're driving while planning tomorrow's argument. You're eating dinner worried about next week. You're lying down reviewing the past year. And the now, that single unrepeatable slice in which life is happening, gets forgotten. Anxiety for him is literally the price you pay for that constant time shifting. You anticipate too much, and your nervous system starts living on alert about something that hasn't even happened yet. You replay too much, and your emotional system starts bleeding for something that's already over. In the middle of all this, the present, the only real thing that exists, becomes a hallway, a corridor, a bridge to somewhere else, a waiting space for something that never arrives. And your whole life slips across that bridge without ever being fully stepped on. Imagine someone finally on vacation. Beautiful beach, good weather, family nearby, the sun setting slowly. And even there, the mind is already thinking about going back, about the pile of work waiting, about how heavy the week is going to be when they return. The feet are in the sand, but the head is at the office. The body is at peace, but the mind is already at war. That mismatch between body and mind is what steals the most experience from human life today. He wasn't asking you to forget the future. He was asking you to stop living in it. He was asking you to use the future as a direction, not as a residence. He was asking you to use the past as learning, not as a prison, and to understand that life can only be lived in the only place where life actually happens, which is here, now, in this exact moment in which you breathe, you read, you feel the weight of your body in the chair, and you hear the sound of the room around you. Did you notice just now, as you read this, that the now showed up for a second? You noticed the air coming in. You noticed the position of your shoulders. That simple moment is what he called the return. It's not a technique. It's not a long practice. It's not a religion in disguise. It's a simple movement of attention. And every time that movement happens, even if it lasts only a few seconds, It reminds you that there's a real ground beneath the mental whirlwind. That ground is where life has always been waiting for you. Now, with all of this settled, we arrive at the central insight of this video, and it's an uncomfortable one. Deeply influenced by Taoism, Watts taught the concept of Wu Wei, which can be translated as effortless action or non-action. It's not laziness. It's action aligned with the natural flow of things, instead of constantly fighting against it. And from this principle comes one of the most counterintuitive ideas in his thinking. The more you chase something, the more it slips away. Think of someone walking into a relationship desperate for love. The desperation pushes love away. Think of someone walking into a job interview desperate for the position. The desperation gets in the way. Think of someone chasing happiness as a direct goal, or running after inner peace as if it were a target. The very chasing produces unhappiness, because it places happiness in a future that is never now. This paradox, which some people later call the reverse law, is central to his thinking. You only reach certain things when you stop chasing them. The chase creates the lack. Presence dissolves the lack. Applied to your life, this means something radical. Stopping the search for the way out can, in itself, be the way out, not in the sense of giving up, in the sense of letting go of urgency, of stopping demanding from the world the exact answer, in the exact format, on the exact deadline, and in the exact way you imagined it. When you let go of that demand, something strange happens. The chaos doesn't disappear, but your relationship with the chaos changes. You stop fighting the current and start floating in it. And while floating, you notice that the current, which seemed to be dragging you toward an unknown depth, was actually carrying you somewhere. It's not magic. It's not toxic positivity. It's the recognition of a simple logic. Life has its own intelligence. You're a part of it, not the judge of it. When you try to direct every detail, you spend all your energy on control and have nothing left for presence. When you trust the flow even a little, you have energy left for what really matters, which is being fully present in the moment you're actually in. And here is where Watts's most beautiful metaphor appears. You are not a drop in the ocean. You are the ocean in the form of a drop. The separation between the individual and the whole, he said, is a useful illusion for practical life, but harmful when taken too seriously. You are not an isolated fragment trying to handle everything on your own. You are a temporary expression of something much greater, manifesting in the form called you for a few decades, and then returning to the whole. This image, influenced by the Indian Vedanta tradition and by Zen, completely changes your relationship to life. Because, if it's true, then the weight of existing alone collapses. You're not walking against the universe. You are the universe experiencing itself in the first person for a while. Every breath you take is the cosmos breathing through you. Every thought you have is reality thinking itself in your voice. There is no separation. There is only manifestation. Picture a wave in the sea. For a few seconds it has its own shape, its own identity, its own movement, its own unique rhythm. It looks like a separate thing. When it falls apart, it doesn't end. It returns. It returns to the sea from which it was never really separate. The form is temporary. The depth is permanent. You are like that. The person you think you are, with a name, a last name, a job title, a story, is the form. But there's a depth in you that's bigger than any form. And that depth is what he was asking you to remember. When this settles into your chest, even for a moment, your fear of the end changes. Your fear of making mistakes changes. Your fear of judgment changes. Your fear of not being enough changes too. You realize you're here on loan, that this body, this biography, this routine, and this name are temporary manifestations of something that doesn't fit completely inside any of them. And that realization, far from leading to nihilism, leads to lightness, because it lifts off you the impossible weight of having to be everything all the time. And now the most important piece for someone who, today, is feeling like life has fallen apart. The chaos you're going through is not the end, it's the birth. Watts compared life to a piece of music, Nobody listens to a symphony waiting for the final chord. Nobody dances to finish the dance. Music is meant to be heard along the way. The dance is made to be danced in the moment it's happening. And the chaos is part of the composition. Think of a child being born. The process is intense. There's contraction, deep effort, a primal sound passing through both the mother's body and the baby's. To someone watching from the outside without context, it looks like a tragedy. But anyone who understands the process knows it's the opposite of a tragedy. It's the beginning. The chaos of birth is the sound of life starting. Watts said that many adult crises work the same way. They aren't the end of anything. They're the loudest part of the beginning of something new. If your life right now has a strange noise inside it, a feeling that something is breaking without permission, consider the possibility that it isn't a rupture. It's a birth. The old character is dissolving, yes. But you, the real you, the depth that lies underneath the character, is not dissolving. It's appearing. And the confusion you're feeling is the natural discomfort of being born. Every new form has to break the shell of the old one. And that breaking, seen from inside, looks like disaster. Seen from outside, with time, reveals itself as an opening. With all of this settled in your chest, we arrive at the second to last movement, freedom. Watts said that modern man is exhausted because he carries the constant weight of having to construct himself. He wakes up, and before anything else, he's already pressuring himself about the next step in this project called me. He studies to construct himself. He works to construct himself. He trains to construct himself. He posts to construct himself. He buys to construct himself. And the project never ends, because it's a project with no finish line. You're simultaneously the architect, the worker, the inspector, and the customer of your own life, never able to rest from any of those roles. Freedom, in line with what he taught, begins when you start to suspect that maybe you don't need to construct yourself all the time, that maybe there's already, inside you, something whole that just needs to stop being interrupted. Every act of excessive self-pressure is an interruption of that whole foundation. Every unnecessary self-criticism is noise. Every compulsive comparison is a cut. Every poorly timed demand is a crack in that silence. And when you reduce those interruptions, even just a little, you notice that the foundation is intact. It always was, you just couldn't hear it because you were too busy constructing yourself. I'm not suggesting you abandon discipline, goals, or growth. I'm saying there's a difference between building from a solid ground and building while trying to be the ground itself. In the first case, there's flow. In the second, there's burnout. Most people live in the second mode, thinking it's the only one possible. And when they discover the first one, they realize that everything they did before was twice as hard as it had to be. Imagine someone writing a book. If, with every paragraph, the person stops and questions their own right to exist as a writer, the book never gets written. But if the person starts from the simple premise that they already are, naturally, someone who writes and just sits down to write, the book flows. The difference isn't in the technique, it's in the ground. Watts was asking for that ground. He was asking you to stop proving you deserve to exist, and simply exist. Because existence, he said, doesn't have to be justified. It just is. And you are part of it. Once again, it's completely valid to feel that all of this sounds too big, that your routine doesn't allow for all this philosophy, that there are real bills, real demands, real problems. I get it. I'm not telling you to abandon practical reality. I'm saying there's a layer beneath it that completely changes the experience of inhabiting it. The bills keep coming, the demands keep existing, but the man who faces that day-to-day from a solid inner ground faces it with a different quality. He's no longer a cornered survivor. He's someone who is present. And from there we arrive at a turning point that for Watts was central. Life is not a problem to be solved. The Western mind insists on treating existence like an equation, as if there were a final solution, a perfect arrangement, a definitive point, a place of arrival where everything would fit into place and the discomfort would stop for good. He looked at this and saw a category mistake. You don't solve a dance, you dance. You don't solve a piece of music, you listen. Life is more like music than like math. When you treat existence like a problem, every day becomes a task, every relationship becomes a project, every feeling becomes something to be corrected, every silence becomes a threat, and the urgency never ends, because problems by definition demand solutions. But when you start to treat life like a dance, the relationship changes entirely. The dance doesn't ask for a solution, it asks for presence, it asks for rhythm, it asks for surrender to the movement. This doesn't mean passivity. Dancing requires attention, requires technique, requires giving yourself over to the rhythm of what's happening. But it's a different kind of listening from the one of someone who's solving. It's an open listening, alert to whatever comes next. Watts said that this shift in posture, from problem solver to participant, is one of the deepest changes a modern adult can make, and that many people only manage to make it after a crisis. Precisely because the crisis breaks the illusion of control and forces surrender. Maybe now it becomes clearer why everything you're feeling makes sense. The exhaustion is the result of years trying to solve the unsolvable. The emptiness is the signal that the old formula is over. The confusion is the passage between an old identity and a new perception. The strangeness is the symptom of waking up. None of this is a defect. All of this is a process, and processes by nature are messy. There's a quiet sentence that could fit here. You are exactly where you need to be, not in the fatalistic sense, not in the sense of accepting everything passively, but in the sense of recognizing that this moment, with all its inner instability, is a legitimate part of waking up. The confusion, the exhaustion, the emptiness, the strangeness with your own reflection. All of this is consciousness reorganizing itself at a deeper level. And that reorganization, although painful, is the healthiest thing happening in your life right now. You spent years being efficient, following the script, performing the acceptable version of yourself, holding up a facade that got heavier by the day. And at some point, the soul got tired. Not because you failed, because you outgrew the script. The old script doesn't fit anymore, and it actually hasn't fit for a long time. What's happening now is the soul demanding a new script, one that's more honest, more truly yours, and the transition between the old one and the new one inevitably looks like a collapse. But it's only a transition. Waking up isn't a magical event. It doesn't arrive in a flash. It doesn't sprout in a single night at a spiritual retreat with hot tea and ambient music. Waking up is essentially ceasing to pretend. And ceasing to pretend, as you've already noticed by now, is more uncomfortable than it sounds. Because it shakes everything. It shakes your work, it shakes your relationships, it shakes your achievements. It shakes the way you see yourself in the mirror. But it's also, and here lies the real hope, the beginning of the only life that can actually be worth living. The life in which you're present, whole, without the obligation to be a smaller version of yourself all the time. There's no shortcut, there's no manual, there's no quick method. There's only this simple and radical step, repeated every day. Coming back to yourself, recognizing the character with affection, allowing something older and more whole to start breathing through you. If something in this video touched a spot inside you that had been forgotten, leave a like. And if you feel you need something deeper, consider joining our members club. You're not lost. You're waking up.